Hi everyone, my name is Della Phillips. I'm an artist as well as I'm known as the Bicycle Lady. How are you doing today? I'm doing great. Now, if you find this video helpful or informative, please subscribe. There's no charge for it. And if you don't mind, click on that thumbs up icon. It lets YouTube know you like this type of content. Now, today's video will be entailing some more testing with the watercolor markers. I'm going to use the same set of markers colors that I used in the prior video when I did the testing with the B paper that was coated with the watercolor ground or the exercising or plain, as well as I showed you some testing using these markers on the Strathmore 500 Imperial watercolor paper, 100% cotton, which turned out wonderful. Now today what we're going to be testing, I don't know if you can see this, hopefully you can, it's the Stillman Birn's sketchbooks. And this one I have, these are both for multimedia, they're both smooth, they're not the cold press variety. So this one here is the Zeta series, and this is the Epsilon. And here's just a little overview of the sketchbooks. And they're based in the US, and as you can see, when they're looking at a medium green, mainly for sketching and dry media, not really for water media, you're looking at the Gamma and the Nova and the Alpha. Now when you're looking at a cold press multimedia, they don't have a watercolor, they have multimedia, where you can use the water-based media as well as dry media, and that's the Beta and the Delta. That's what's a cold press. Now the ones I have here is the Epsilon and the Zeta. Again, it's good for water media, pen and ink, it's smooth, and I thought that might be good with markers as long as it works well. Now the markers I'm using today is the same I used before, and essentially it's the Faber Castell Scarlet Red. The rest of them will be the Winsor Newton Promarker watercolor marker, Sepia, Prussian blue hue, Cadmium red hue, permanent rose hue, and hooker green, which will give a good variety of colors and how they perform with direct application onto the paper. Because I'm only looking at direct application. I'm not looking on how it performs if you palette it out on another sheet or a piece of plastic and then take a brush and transfer the color over. I want to use them directly, be able to blend them out. And if I need to palette, I can, but I want the flexibility to do a lot of different options. So this book here, I'm going to move the Zeta, which I recently got in. Here you see the first book I'm going to test, which is the Epsilon Stillman Birn. I initially got this on sale on Amazon, and I decided to use it for my notebook for ideas to draw my cartoon of my cat, which was Mr. Bo. And you did see a posting of that with the Happy New Year tiara that he had on. Now I went to the back page, or next to the back, and decided I'll do the testing of the markers there. It'd be great if these markers worked well on this paper. I could use that when I'm working out ideas with the Mr. Bo cartoon. Here you see I did put down a swatch of the Faber-Castell Deep Scarlet Red, and I am blending out the color, and it's doing quite well. And actually it does blend out to the point where you don't hardly see any of the direct application line. There's just a hint. Next, of course, is the infamous Sepia, the one that is very hard to blend out on papers. It doesn't do so well. It's only blended halfway. The application marks, what I call ghosting, you can see quite clearly through there. That's not too good. Now here's the Prussian blue, and I'm using a clean brush with water and blending that out. Now there is still some lines where you can see where the marker was directly applied to the paper. It's not as bad as the sepia, obviously, but there is still some. Now here's the cadmium red hue. And as before, when I did testing for the prior video, I'm putting down swatches plus a line to the side that I can try to reactivate at a later time. Now this reactivates very well. Again, it's just like the top one. There's a hint at most of where the marker was directly applied to the paper. It's nothing like the sepia. The sepia one was definitely not acceptable. But you can work with that, as long as you know that that is the case with that color. Now here's the rose, and it does blend out thoroughly. So I was happy with that. Overall, I'm pretty happy and really pleasantly surprised over how well the markers are reacting with this paper. It is 100% cellulose. They say it's internally sized and then sized on the surface on both sides of the paper. I did apply the Hooker's Green Deep. I apologize that it's off camera. I didn't realize that at the time. But I am reactivating it, and here you can see that it did reactivate very well. There's just a slight indication of where it was directly applied. There is some warping of the paper because the paper is so thin. Now I brought up the Zeta book, and that's the Stillman Birn, a smooth multimedia book. And I put it on next to the back page. I'm applying the swatches of the deep Scarlet Red from Faber Castell and reactivating it. And as you can see here, there's a definite line or ghosting where the marker was directly applied to the paper where it's not blending all out. It is performing, with this one, worse than the Epsilon. Now here's the sepia. I'm not holding out much hope for it, but let's go ahead and test it anyway. And as you can see, there's some blending. About the same as what was on the Epsilon, or a little bit worse. Now next is the Prussian blue. And as you can see, when I blend it out, it's worse than what it was on the Epsilon. There's definite line ghosting through where you can see it was directly applied. And there you saw where I went back and put the testing line for later. Next color is the cadmium red hue. And as you see, I'm blending that out. And again, you can see definitely lines where the marker was applied to the paper. It doesn't blend out smooth, far less than what was on the Epsilon. Now here's the rose. And it does blend a little bit better, but still it's not up to the level of blending that I saw on the Epsilon. You do still have the definite ghosting of the lines showing through where you've directly applied the marker. Now here's the Hooker's Green Deep. And yes, definitely, it's not blending or going and making a blend as well as what was in the Epsilon. So here's the Epsilon book. And it's been actually 20 minutes. Now I'm going back in and trying to reactivate the one marker line. As you see, there is some reactivation, but definitely you can see the line where the marker was applied to the deep scarlet red, as well as, you know, the sepia. It's not much difference. There is a fair amount of blending of the Prussian blue, but still you're going to see that application line very defined. The cadmium red hue, it does a little bit better, but there is still a slight hint of a ghosted line there of where the marker was applied to the paper. Now the rose is pretty much the same as what we saw with swatching, a little bit of a line, but you can still see. And now here's the Hooker's Green. We saw a similar type of result when I did the testing on the Strathmore. That doesn't bother me. It possibly could be used to my advantage, depending on how I'm doing it. The big question here is, with this book, is the possible warping due to the weight of the paper being so light. Now, here's the Zeta book. I'm still going to test it, even though I see it. It's just not satisfactory. You see some reconstitution of the deep scarlet red Faber Castell, but definite lines showing through. Same thing with the sepia and the Prussian blue. Like I said, I don't see this as a book where I can use the technique of direct apply the color and then blend it out. It's just not satisfactory for that type of technique. So I don't see this as a satisfactory book for me to use for watercolor markers, because I want everything. Direct apply, whether a palette, direct apply, or anything. That's disappointing. I had high hopes. So here's a comparison of the two again, bringing them back both up. I know I moved the Zeta a little bit off camera there, I apologize. The two that did show prominent ghosting would be the Sepia, absolutely, and then next would be the Prussian blue. But overall, the Epsilon book looks promising and quite surprising. If you find this video helpful or informative, please subscribe. It would help me out a lot with YouTube, as well as click on that thumbs up icon. It tells them you like this type of content. Until next time, you have a good day.